Let's start again. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Pardot Consultant 7 Days Bootcamp, hosted by Pardot New Delhi and Pardot Ajmer Trailblazer Community Group. I give a very warm welcome to you, Trailblazers out there. Thanks for joining in. Thank you so much. I'm sure you guys are super duper excited to hear lead management by our own marketing champion, Ashley Anger. We welcome you, Ashley. Thank you so much for spending our time with us. We are super duper excited once again to hear all the things about lead management from you. Again, for joining us. Over to you, Ashley.
Thank you so much, Isha. It's a pleasure to be here. I am very excited. All right. So let's dive right in. Welcome everyone to day 5 of the Pardot Consultant Bootcamp. We'll be talking about lead management today. My name is Ashley Anger. I am a 3-time Salesforce certified marketing champion. I started as a user, fell in love with Pardot, and that brought me to where I am today. So now I'm a consultant on the marketing solutions team at Coastal Cloud. I did drop my social links in there for LinkedIn and Twitter. If you're looking for someone to just cheer you on or someone to ask questions to, I'm always available. So definitely feel free to connect with me in both of those spots. All right. So again, getting a little ahead of myself here. Today's topic is lead management. I'm going to turn my camera off because my computer's being a little bit funny. All right. So as other speakers did, this is pulled right from the exam guide for the lead management section of the exam, and it's worth 14% of the exam. So although it's not the largest part, it does play on what we've learned already this week so far. We'll break each of these bullet points down into smaller sections as we walk through today's session. First, though, before we get started, I'd like to do a quick recap of some of the basic lead gen features and assets that Pardot includes, since today's session will kind of be incorporating a lot of these pieces. So first up is visitors versus prospects. Quick recap on that. A prospect is Pardot's name for a site visitor who has given you their email address. So the email address is the one piece of information that's required for a prospect to be created. Although as marketers, I'm sure we all like all the information. All they need is an email address. And the conversion can happen from a Pardot form that your client would embed on their website, a form on their site that you connect to a Pardot form handler, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and also a form that they host on a Pardot landing page. So forms, form handlers, and landing page submissions are all super easy ways for visitors to provide their email address and other information in order to become an identified prospect. Visitor is someone who's just visited the site, but we don't have any information on them, so we can't associate their engagement and their clicks and all of those fun things with an individual person. Scoring and scoring categories. So a prospect score is a numerical value that shows how interested the prospect is in you. So we give people score increases or decreases even based on a number of things, and that includes engagement or lack of engagement. So some of the best scoring models I've seen as a consultant really include a mix between form submits, website clicks, email engagement, and social media engagement. Scoring profiles are a must-have if you have separate divisions, or not scoring profiles, scoring categories are a must-have if you have separate divisions or businesses running within your single Pardot org. Before business units came along and they were available, I used scoring categories to keep brands separate. They still work great if you're looking at marketing for different regions or brands within brands or cross-selling opportunities and divisions. So those are definitely something that you want to be aware of and use cases for those. And then last up on our quick refresher is grading and personas. So a prospect's grade is how interested you should be in them. So it's a letter value that shows how close to an ideal client or customer they would be based on field criteria. So that could be location, job title, although I'm not personally a fan of job title, just because there's so many different variances for that. But everyone starts with a grade of a D, and when they convert, but then when it's triggered by a change, either positive or negative, their score or their grade can increase or decrease by anywhere between a third of a letter grade and a full grade. So I appreciate having everyone not start at a D right away unless it's triggered by a change, just because I've always been a big fan of good grades, even back in school. So logging into my org and seeing a bunch of Ds is not something that I would want to do. So definitely working on getting them and building my criteria out to pull the As. So they're also automated with automation rules, which I believe Jen Kazin talked about earlier in the week. So if you're looking for a refresher on automation rules, definitely check out her session. Okay, so let's start by just breaking this down into sections to better analyze the question. Given a customer scenario, develop and recommend a lead gen strategy, including Pardot assets. Lead generation is a key part of B2B marketing. I'm sure you've all heard about the importance of quality leads being delivered to sales and marketing alignment, and it is so true. That's what a lot of clients or customers are looking for. So keep in mind, though, what we cover is very general, and each business is different. So just like you'd experience as a Pardot consultant doing actual consulting, there will be a lot of things that we talk about today that are more along the lines of best practices and not necessarily a must-do for every business. Pardot does recommend 5 essential elements of a lead gen strategy that will set you up for success. So I've added a few bonus elements that I find useful as well. Okay. So lead gen strategy, I start with the bonus, audience and buyer persona, because I am a huge fan of buyer personas, buyer's journey, funnels, all of those fun things. And I do think audience is very important. You need to know who you're trying to target. So your client's lead gen strategy will likely look a little different than what we're going to talk about, like I mentioned, but that's okay, because I'll just be touching on some of the common practices I've seen as a consultant and get you thinking about how you can tie some of these into your exam prep. So we'll start officially with audience and advertising. So the first step to generating leads is to identify your audience and who you're trying to target. So many ad platforms like Facebook allow you to target based on criteria such as geography, location, demographics, interests, things like that. For even more power, you can consider looking into connecting Advertising Studio to your Pardot as well. It's another Salesforce like program. The second step is to understand which digital platforms your customers are on. So where are they spending most of their time? How are they consuming information? And then once you figured out who you're going to target and what you're going to do to reach them, the next step is to make your advertising copy and creative engaging. It's great if you know who you want to talk to, but if you don't know what you're putting out to them or if it's going to be effective, it's not going to be worth your while. So using key terms or key search terms in your ads is helpful. If your ad copy answers your audience's questions or guides them in their research, then the ad will be more effective. Getting creative with your ad formats. So many platforms support video, text, image carousels. This gives B2B marketers the opportunity to test the best designs and messaging that works with your audience specifically. Also, don't forget to include a strong call to action. So you want your users to understand exactly what you want them to do. Keep it simple, keep it descriptive. I mean, claim your $1,000 is much more interesting than a click here or a more info. So you definitely want to be making sure that your CTAs are strong and they're very direct. I also love to use custom redirects for my call to actions. So if I'm looking to add completion actions onto those, that's definitely something to keep in mind for the exam. So for example, if I have someone click on a third-party ad or a social post I may want to not only track the clicks separately from my custom redirect report, but also fire a notification or assign a task to the sales team. Completion actions are beautiful, custom redirects are beautiful, and those are a few things that'll definitely help your flow of your warm leads to your sales department. So last, you want to make sure that your ads drive your prospects to relevant content. So I recently spoke at Pardot and did an entire session on personas and buyer's journey and creating content that converts. So we won't dig into that here, but definitely check it out if you'd like to learn more about that piece of the lead gen strategy. And I did add the link in the resources tab at the end of this presentation for you. So trust is also a big one here. Everything your client's brand puts out into the universe, and even some things that it chooses not to, paint a picture of your client's brand. So you definitely want to make sure that you're boosting the positive things, building trust among followers or those who are engaging, and that also supports adding prospects to your top of funnel. Typically, as potential prospects read through posts or advertisements on social or blogs or website or whatever that may be, the goal is to provide value up front, right? We want to earn their trust, make sure that we're telling them what they're going to get and then delivering on that promise. But then we also want to give them the opportunity to learn more or to contact us. So here's where your forms would come in, or your form handlers. And there have also been a pretty large jump in chatbots and conversational marketing as conversion as well. But for the sake of the exam prep today, we'll just stick to forms and landing pages. All right, so on to forms and landing pages. We've got some tips for creating conversion-heavy landing pages and forms. They're an excellent conversion point where the lead gen magic happens, because this is where it turns those visitors into prospects. So now we can actually market to them through Pardot. So the key to good conversion on forms and landing pages is going back to that content slide that we just looked at a minute ago. So it needs to have good content, a very strong and clear call to action, and telling your visitor exactly what you want them to do and what they're going to get out of it. So we don't want to make them guess. We don't want to give them too many options. I don't know about you guys, but I know I'll get lost and lose interest if I have too many different directions or options to take on a single page. If there are 15 call to action buttons, it gets a little crazy, and people will lose the point of being on that page or what they came to do. So this is important to share with clients, especially because oftentimes I find that they want an upcoming course to have a landing page with like 10 scrolls worth of paragraph content. Then they try to put the registration button down at the bottom. Not a good idea. So the number of people who are going to read paragraph after paragraph of content and then search for a button to register is slim to none, right? Plop one of those buttons right at the top before a scroll. House any of that important content on the page. Try to keep it to like 1 or 2 scrolls. You don't want it to be really extensive. And then the majority of the information for the upcoming course or whatever that landing page would look like, how's that type of information on your website? So not only will it really assist in boosting your SEO, but it's also going to keep your landing page really clear and direct. And as a consultant, you'll run across a lot of things like that you just have to be ready to listen to what the client is asking for and talking about, and then being able to guide them towards those best practices. And it's similar with forms. So recommend keeping the form fields to a limit. You'll hear different numbers from different industries, but I've worked mostly in B2B and professional services, and I found that 3 to 5 fields works best. I believe that's also Pardot's recommendation as well. So yes, again, as a marketer and consultant, I want all of the information. I love it. The more information, the better. The more segmentation you can do, the more detailed you can get, absolutely. But all of that will come in good time. Instead of creating long forms that have a drop in completions, I would definitely recommend progressive profiling to collect new fields each time a prospect completes a form. So we'll talk about that in a little bit also. And then our next step is nurture programs. So nurture programs take place after the initial conversion, yes, but it's still an important step in your lead gen strategy. So we can use all of the information that we've collected up to this point to help our clients warm the leads that they're seeing at their top of funnel. So I did find a way that Pardot did this a few years ago. So I wanted to kind of share this with everyone. I think it pulls a lot of the pieces together. So when a net new lead entered their database, they would look at the last piece of content that they interacted with before they became a known prospect. So that could be anything from an ebook to an upcoming webinar registration form to a recorded webinar video. I know I've looked all over the website, so I've probably been in this funnel. So that's where they start. Then the next step is to look at the topic of that particular asset. So was it a lead gen field guide? If so, they'd be added to a nurture program to send valuable content about how to generate more leads with marketing automation. Was it the Pardot for Financial Services recorded webinar? If so, the nurture program that they would be added to would include relevant content specifically tailored to marketers in that financial services industry. So then each email they sent would include call to actions that leveraged the progressive profiling fields that we had talked about to help Salesforce and Pardot learn more about the prospects. And each time someone engaged with them, Pardot would increase their score. So this helps separate the warm leads from those who might still need to be nurtured. And then once a lead met the scoring threshold, they would be sent over to sales for follow-up. So we've got quite a few different key assets that Pardot has in their system, all kind of tied into this one short example of a lead gen strategy. Ties everything, all the pieces together. Okay. And then one of the final pieces of the puzzle, I would say, is seeing how your strategy is working. So was your client successful? When reporting on lead gen efforts, you definitely want to make sure that you keep specific metrics in mind. And this is just a really baseline level, but we're looking at the click-through rate, conversion rate, cost per lead, cost per marketing qualified lead to sales qualified lead to opportunity, and then the opportunity close rate. A tool like B2BMA is excellent when it comes to reporting on these metrics and understanding the marketing and sales funnel and how it's performing. So I believe that's pretty common with Pardot users now. We have a lot of people, especially that I'm seeing, making sure that they're using their B2B marketing analytics tool, they're building out custom dashboards and reports and things like that. So that's definitely going to see growth in the future. I would look into reviewing some of the main dashboards and things for B2B marketing analytics as well in preparation for your exam. Okay, so that was kind of a lot all thrown out there very quickly. But there are a few key assets in Pardot to creating a lead gen strategy, kind of what we talked about a few slides ago. And the list could go on and on, but I pulled a few of my favorites and the ones that I see when I'm doing Pardot consulting myself. So forms and form handlers, absolutely. If a client has a lot of forms built on maybe a form assembly or a form stack, or even on their website specifically, or they're using a third party to collect really specific information, a form handler would be a great option for them. That way you can just connect those to Pardot and still feed that information into your Pardot system. Landing pages we touched on also. Custom redirects, one of my favorite small features, but I love them because of the ability to use completion actions on that. Page actions are also great. Those are like completion actions, but specific to a web page. So these are great to fire notifications to your sales team or adjust score if someone's looking at a pricing page. You can recommend, if you're working with a client who has a sales model figured out, and there are certain key pages that they're noticing conversion happen after they're visited, throw a page action on those and call those out specifically in the prospect records. Fire notifications, that's what it's for. There's also campaigns, which is a whole topic all in itself, but definitely recommend learning about and understanding how connected campaigns works. Then we've got engagement programs and scoring and grading, which we kind of touched on also. So a lot of information in this first section. It really is just tying together the pieces in Pardot that are available and how they can all work together, like the actual Pardot example that we talked through, to help a client do something similar. Okay. So the next section would be, given a lead qualification threshold, classify prospects appropriately. Now that the leads have been generated, how do you recommend a lead qualification threshold? So when a client is asking for lead qualification threshold, they're typically asking for how they can tell a good lead from a poor lead, right? And we can do that a lot with technology, but please keep in mind that for the next section, especially, we're talking about people. So although we can create somewhat of an ideal and like an ideal vision with the data that we have collected in our Pardot and Salesforce systems, it doesn't provide a holistic view of an actual person right away. So that takes time to build on. So a caveat, top of mind, is job title. And remember how I mentioned that wasn't my favorite field to grade off of? That's because job titles vary from industry to industry, and roles and responsibilities can vary from company to company. So if you're looking to target a Chief Awesome Officer, you may find their titles are better reflected in operations or human resources or business ops. There's a million other areas that you may find a Chief Awesome Officer's roles and responsibilities. But being able to pull that job title and segment and build a list based on that is probably not as likely to happen. So if you're looking to target someone, though, who typically has the power to make decisions at that chief level, maybe consider a pick list field with a C-suite or C-level director, manager, etc. So that way you can still segment a bit. And then as an added bonus, it also keeps your data cleaner since you won't have a bunch of text fields as job titles. So enough of that. I get really excited about this stuff, but just definitely something to think about as you're building out your forms and providing recommendations to your clients. But back to lead qualification. Okay, so a lead qualification threshold is a combination of a score and a grade. So the key to helping a client determine their threshold is by helping them create a custom scoring rules and profiles. If a company is heavy on webinars and they find that they open a lot of opportunities following webinars, you may want to suggest they bump the point value for webinars up. Perhaps after they attend 3 webinars, they're considered a potential lead. These are all things that you can talk about with your clients. And then on the flip side of that, if they are from a competitor's company, they're likely not looking for your services. So you would likely not want to pass them over to sales. So this is where the grade comes in. So grades are pushed by automation rules. So once you determine the criteria for the grade, the automation rule will match based on that criteria, assigning them anywhere from the 3rd letter grade to a full grade based on what fits the client best. So a few key pieces to remember in here. Grades are run by automation rules. Scoring and grading together will form that lead qualification threshold. All right, so let's take a look at this graphic that I pulled from the Pardot website because it does a great job of summing things up. So we've got Jacob over here on the left. Jacob's a great fit for the product or service, but he hasn't had time to do any research or doesn't know that the product exists yet. So the lack of activity, his score only being 12, is why he hasn't engaged enough. So he doesn't have a high score yet, but his lead grade is a B+. So that means that he's matching a lot of the ideal criteria that we're looking for our clients. So high score means they're engaged in us. High grade means that we should be excited and they're close to an ideal client. So ideally what we're looking for in a warm lead or a hot lead would be a high score and a high grade, right? Because that would be ideal. Someone who's very engaged with us and someone who also fits our ideal profile. Then we've got Sarah. Sarah's got a really high lead score at 310, but her lead grade is a D-. So she's not fitting our ideal client, but she's extremely engaged in our content. So this would be an example that Sarah would be a student. Maybe she's interested in an internship with the company and all of her activity on the site. So she's browsing our careers pages and she is doing research on the company. Maybe it's right before an interview. It's given her a great score because she is very engaged on our trackable assets and our website and things like that. But since she's not going to purchase, she receives a low grade. So the recommended action here would be not to assign Sarah to a sales rep because she has that low grade. and she's not an ideal client for them to pursue. Next up, we have Chris. So Chris has a pretty good lead score, I would say, and his lead grade is a C minus. So it's obvious that Chris is excited about the company, but he may not be the best fit for the product. So this gives him the decent score, but a moderate grade. So in this case, we would want to nurture Chris, put him on a drip campaign or an engagement program, and that way he's still getting fed information. He can see what the company is all about, but we don't have to put our human bodies or our sales team necessarily trying to spend time reaching out to him multiple times to see if he'd be interested in the product or service that we offer. And then last up is Sam. And Sam is a great lead. She's got even a little star next to her, similar to Jacob. She's got a really high score of 390, and she's got a lead grade of A minus. So what this tells us is she's very engaged, but she's also a very close match to our absolute ideal client. So she's done her research. She has a lot of interest in our product. She fits our ideal profile. So the recommended action here is we would want to send Sam pricing and the bottom of funnel resources. Maybe we would have her sent over to someone on the sales team to reach out, whatever that business process looks like for that client. But she's someone we would absolutely want to engage with and follow up with. So there are 4 different examples of how you would use score and grade to kind of determine what that next step would be. And then at that point, we automatically build out those processes. So we're directing people to the right, either the right person from our company or to the right nurture program or engagement program so they can continue to learn about what our client services offer. And that leads us right into our next and final section. And that is, given a scenario, recommend a model to route qualified and unqualified leads across the business. Sorry guys, my clicking is all over the place today. Okay, so now we've come up with the lead gen strategy. We've qualified, or at least considered who's qualified versus who's not. We've set the lead qualification threshold in place. So what comes next, right? What would we do with them now? And let's look back at the tools that we could use to route them appropriately, similar to the example that we talked about in the beginning. So we'll break this down into warm, hot leads, and then the unengaged or not qualified leads, just to keep things simple. So let's take into account what the client scoring and grading model looks like for each client that we're working with. So for example, we'll use for this case, the score of 300 or higher and a grade of B+ or better as our lead qualification threshold for our example. So ways that we would route qualified leads, we could create an automation rule for when a prospect hits the threshold of a score of 300 or higher and a grade of B+ or better. And then we could have them assigned to a user. So the assignment pushes the sync with Salesforce, and now we can fire notifications and create Salesforce tasks specifically for the salesperson responsible for this lead. So they're automatically directed to the person that they need to talk to, making sure that if we have a company that has multiple divisions, we would use scoring categories to determine what that looks like, or we could assign specific people or specific groups and do a round robin of sorts that way as well for assignment. We could also create a dynamic list using the criteria above so that we always have an up-to-date warm or hot leads list. Typically when I work with clients, one of the things that they always are looking for is to be able to pull a warm leads and a hot leads list from the marketing side at any point. So being able to set up this dynamic list, and maybe warm leads are prospects with a score of 150 to 299, and hot leads are with a score of 300 or higher. We can separate it based on those. So we've always got the ability to pull a list of warm leads and a list of hot leads in a pinch. And this has happened pretty often when they're looking for the sales team to have a list of people who have been engaged, but they're doing some quote unquote cold calling. this is really when that comes in handy. It's very easy to set up. You set it up one time and then you're good to go. But definitely, I would say the key rule here outside of completion actions and things like that would be specific to when someone hits the lead qualification threshold, setting up that automation rule and assigning them, because that just makes your Pardot and your Salesforce speak together, and that is officially kind of the handoff from marketing to sales at that point. Okay, so going back to our 4 friends that we were just talking about, the sample lead qualification for ways to route the unqualified leads, so people who are not necessarily hitting that score of 300 plus and the grade of B plus or better. We've got a couple different options here. So we could do high grade and a low score. So if they have that combination of high grade, which means that they're our ideal customer, low score, they haven't engaged much, we would add them to a nurture program. So if they're just beginning to engage, that may be why their score is low. We may want to provide more information to them, make sure that they're getting a steady feed of content that is completely relevant to them. And then as they engage with more of that content, their score will increase. And then at some point, they would be considered a warm lead if that's truly content that is relevant to them and that's working for them. So we would feed them what they need by adding them to a list that feeds them information they're interested in for a specific engagement program. So like Pardot's example in the beginning, we have, if there are 2 different areas of the business, we would want to add them to the one that they were interested in. So once they've engaged with more content, score increases, they'll fall into our lead qualification threshold, hit that score of 300 plus and that grade of B plus or better. The automation rule will catch them and they will be assigned to a salesperson or assigned to a user. Now, if they have a low grade and a high score, then I like to check to see if they're a competitor. The low grade means that they're not matching our ideal client profile. So we definitely want to take a look at that. It could be the case of the intern that we talked about also, or a job seeker engaging with a lot of content, but not necessarily a good fit to hand over to sales. Nurture programs are super important for leads and contacts that aren't yet ready to buy. So if a lead goes cold, sales reps can pass the prospect back to marketing and they can add them to a nurture program or a drip program and receive content that will keep your client's brand top of mind so that the prospect is ready to engage again after they see some of this information. And then in all cases, even though they may not look good on paper, it doesn't mean that you should ignore them. If there's someone who's engaging in your content or your client's content, that does mean something. So even though they may not have a score of 300 plus and a grade of B plus or better, based on just their criteria for the grade, they may have different, going back again to the roles and responsibilities and the variance there, they may have the roles and responsibilities of a C-level employee, but they are, a manager level or just a team member level. So just keep in mind, we can pull a lot of information from these fields, but we can't pull everything because people are still people, companies are still companies, and we still have to keep that piece in mind. Awesome. So this is actually one of the last slides. So it's just a little excerpt that I took from an excellent article called How to Create Meaningful Conversations with Effective Lead Routing. And this is, I think it just sums it up beautifully in the importance of lead routing. So set routing rules to avoid the clunky handoff from person to person, getting the prospect to the meaningful conversation they want when they want it. This is key for as you're assigning people, as you're triggering those Pardot to Salesforce connections, as you're all of the pieces that we kind of talked about today. This is the reason that we use them all together. So in the case of known accounts, the rep with the open opportunity for that company can now see that someone else has reached out. So being able to track all of the engagement is huge. I can't tell you how many times clients have had the question, how do I know if I own this person? How do I know if someone else is already working with them? How do I know if there's already a different division that's in contact with them? This is excellent for that. So from there, you can take the right action. The rep can use that as a reason to re-engage. Maybe they haven't been engaged with for a while. The ABM target account can be activated, or if it's more for service or support, your customer support team can discuss add-on services if they're going through that process with existing customers. So if the lead is new, then round robin routing capabilities can assure that you never leave them waiting for a response. You can also make sure using round robin routing that everyone has an equal amount of opportunity on your team. And that's something, especially if you're looking at larger teams, region-based teams, state, country-based teams, making sure that you are sharing those best practices with your clients as well. So we kicked through that very quickly. I feel like I talked your ear off for the last 40 minutes. So I did add the slide with resources and references. There are some excellent resources in here. The complete guide to lead nurturing gets really in depth. The Pardot scoring and grading lab, that's where I pulled that picture of those 4 prospects from. That's really fun if you're looking for an interactive tool to kind of see how different scoring and grading would work, and best recommended practice for that. The complete guide to automated lead scoring and grading is also a complete guide. So these 2 together on scoring and grading were absolutely where I started when I was interested in learning about scoring and grading myself. And then the Pardot Consultant Study Guide. This is what Lucy has put together on the Salesforce Bend website. So definitely check this out. And then we've got the Salesforce Certified Pardot Consultant Exam Guide, which I'm sure everyone on this call is familiar with already because that's why we're here. And then Pardot releases. Awesome. So that was a ton to cover. If there are any questions or anything, I would love to take those. We've got a few minutes.
That was incredible, Ashley. Trust me, it was super duper session. A lot of information, a lot of knowledge on lead management part. So we have a couple of questions in the chat. I'll just take them up. One moment. Would you please share some thoughts around Pardot integration with social and advertising studio in creation of lead generation strategy and maximizing ROI?
Ooh, that is a loaded question. Yes, so that could probably be a call or a session all on its own. I definitely think just looking at it from a really high level, because we know that people are engaging on social media, we know that our brands are really working towards building social media presence. It's a great place to advertise, to segment, to do more of those advertising pieces, even paid advertising. There are some other add-ons that you can add on to your Pardot. So there is the Marketing Cloud Social Studio and Advertising Studio that we've done some implementations on for Pardot clients, and they're using those in addition to their Pardot. So the way that they're tying those together, really at a high level, it's a little more technical, but at a really high level, the way that they're tying those pieces together is because they're cookied and they're in your Pardot already, because they're a prospect, being able to see the engagement in those 2 programs helps build up that score. It also works really well if you're looking at adding those bits and pieces into an engagement program as a step. So you can use some of that information, and then tying it all back to a campaign depending on your campaign structure and what that looks like, being able to account for all of those pieces as touch points would be how you would set up your campaign to pull a pretty solid ROI. So it does vary by company, where they're putting a lot of emphasis, what percentage of the campaign they want to attribute to, like what weight, I should say, not what percentage, but what weight they would want to attribute to social versus webinars versus other things that you're scoring on. But there's a lot of flexibility there to meet a lot of different needs. So, Pardot has the social posting right from the instant. So if you wanted to keep it simple, maybe your client doesn't have a huge, or one person or a team of people managing their social presence, then being able to just post directly out of Pardot also gives you some reporting bits as well. So that could go a lot of different directions, all just depending on what your client's goals are, who they have kind of managing their social presence on their end, and what they're looking for specifically.
I think we need a wider window to discuss more on that.
Yeah. There's also a lot of really great information out there in the Trailblazer community on other use cases that people may be pulling those tools in. So I'd encourage people to check that out.
Awesome, awesome. If you feel any useful links that can be useful for the other trailblazers out there, please feel free to share it with me, and I will post it in the description of the recording for the session today. We'll just take a couple of more questions, which says, what are some challenges you're faced with lead generation strategy in Pardot? Any limitations that we should be aware of? Any thoughts you want to put, Ashley? Anything, any challenges you're faced when you're planning your lead generation strategy, or not a problem. If you want to pull it out in some more time, please feel free to put it in the Pardot Consultant Slack channel, and trailblazers can be benefited anyhow.
Yeah, I think that it's because it can be so different for each company. That's
Mhm.
really the challenge in itself. Once you understand the goals of the company and you understand what's going to make them successful for their boss, and what you can do to make the entire company successful, and as a consultant make your engagement with the company show value, that's kind of really where it all stems from. So some companies are, manufacturing companies will have a completely different way of doing lead gen than a recruiting company, but Pardot works for both of those. So I think just understanding the goals is really the core of where it all starts, and that would be the hardest part. Outside of that, Pardot gives you all of the tools that you need to be able to create a strategy based on whatever those goals are.
Awesome. So we'll just take the last question for the day, which says the fields that we chose as progressive profiling on a form show up during the next visit of the visitor on our marketing asset as a next page of a form during the first visit itself. Is it true?
Yes. So this is one of my favorite features of Pardot forms, because the first time a prospect hits your website or they fill out a form, maybe you're asking for first name, last name, and email address. The next time they come back, it'll be email address, and maybe it's company and company size, or maybe it's company and not job title, because we all know how I feel about that, but maybe it's company size and like a pick list for job level or job role or responsibility. And then they fill those out. Then the next time they come back, you're asking, their pet's name, or how many farm animals they have, whatever is relevant to your business. But you can keep collecting all of those different pieces of information, and that just builds out the entire profile of your prospect. So then you can start segmenting on all of that information. And it's not overwhelming. You're keeping it to 3 to 5 fields initially. So it's an excellent way to continue to collect information that's not necessarily the hottest information you need to collect, but that will really help you form a more full picture of who you're engaging with and who you're talking to.
Great, a great answer there. I'll just take one more question, which says, is there a workaround to apply the completion actions of a custom redirect when a new prospect does a form submission? By default, I read in the help that Pardot only applies completion actions from custom redirect if the record already exists in the Pardot database.
So if you have a form completion, then that is putting them into the database. So the completion action should fire. If I would say if they're in the database and you're not seeing them fire, then that's probably going to be a support ticket.
Great. So, with that note, if I missed any of the questions, with due respect of the time, please feel free to put them in the Parrot Consultant Slack channel. It's open for anything about Parrot Consultant or anything in Pardot, but definitely not for support. Please feel free to connect there, stay connected, stay tuned. Thank you so much, Ashley, once again for sparing our time with us. It was so useful and full of knowledge session today, all about product and lead management. Thank you, everybody out there, for joining us today for day 5 of Product Consultant Bootcamp. See you right tomorrow, same time for day 6 tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you.